Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the final webinar in our series with APTIM. My name is Rebecca. I'm the Business Development Manager at Green Key Global. We're the leading sustainability certification program for the hotel and lodging program in North America. Today, APTIM's presentation is about energy conservation and clean energy. Before we get started on that, I just want to go over a bit of housekeeping. First, your participation is encouraged through this session. At any time during today's webinar, please use the Q&A feature to ask your questions. Please use the thumbs up icon to evoke questions in the queue, which will help us get to your question more quickly. Finally, we'll be recording today's session and it will be available on demand on the Green Key website. So today's session is focusing on energy within hotels, which is a key topic in sustainable tourism, as it falls under the 7th Sustainable Development Goal, affordable and clean energy. We will be learning about best practices for energy conservation and utilizing clean and renewable energy to reduce and offset GHG emissions. We're also going to be discussing electric vehicle charging stations, which I know is a huge topic for most of you, and the importance of this new amenity for your guests and how it can add revenue to your bottom line. So, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speakers today. Joining me is Daniel Rees, National Director of Energy Program Operations at APTIM, Brian Bilbo, APTIM's Clean Technology Business Development Director, and Christian Detman, Client Relationship Manager for the hospitality industry within APTIM's Compliance and Permitting Division. Thank you so much for being here. Over to you,
Becca, thank you. Again, thank you very much for having us. We're excited to end this series talking about energy conservation and clean energy. So our agenda today will be a quick introduction of APTIM, what drivers are pushing energy conservation and clean energy into the hospitality industry. We move into discussing our specific topics within energy, and we'll open up to a Q&A session at the end of our webinar. So let's get going. So for those of you who were not on our previous webinars, APTIM is a large environmental consulting firm with our headquarters in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, with an additional 55 offices throughout the rest of the United States. In addition to a few offices worldwide. Our team has grown to over 4,000 members, and we're all focused on the success of our clients. Our core services are critical infrastructure, which includes disaster response and recovery. In fact, we have a large team already deployed in Florida in response to the most recent hurricane. Technical and data solutions, where we work with our clients on fire protection and compliance, permitting and licensing needs. Of course, our environmental services that assist our hospitality clients on their waste minimization, which also includes grant management services. Our program management services that include our ESG solutions, resiliency services, and last but not least, our sustainable and energy solutions. So we'll be discussing that in greater detail today. So now that you have a little bit of an understanding of who APTIM is, let's talk about our objectives. Our goal is to demystify the high cost of specific installations, share energy trends within the hospitality industry. We'll identify practical steps to get started with your energy efficiencies within your properties. So why is it playing a role in hospitality? Well, first and foremost, the guest cares. In recent Booking.com report, 83% of travelers think sustainable travel is vital, with 78% of travelers wanting to reduce their energy consumption when traveling. As leisure travel continues to demand, we're seeing increased focus on the revenue booking channels. Booking.com has their Travel Sustainable program that recognizes hotels with impactful sustainability practices. And the new tool that comes courtesy of Google. Launched last month, Google will label hotels as eco-certified in their global search results with a leaf-shaped icon next to the hotel's name. By clicking on that icon, you'll learn the specific details that a property is focused with regards to their sustainability practices, such as having water use audited by an independent organization, or using energy from carbon-free sources. This new feature relies on certification programs like Green Key Global to do all the hard work of establishing a hotel's green credibility. So Green Key Global already sends updated information to all revenue channels on a monthly basis, but I encourage you to make sure that your hotel's listing on Google's business page has all of your sustainable practices listed. Hospitality, oops, excuse me. I went a little too far here, apologize. Technical difficulty here. So hospitality as a whole is beginning to see increased enforcement on regulations. As we talked about our waste presentation last week, Ritz-Carlton properties in California were hit with a $500,000 fine in August of earlier this year. If you did not have a chance to join us on that webinar, make sure you go to the Green Key Global website to watch our previous webinar. So no hotelier wants to miss the chance to book an event or fill your rooms or win an account because the faculty doesn't have any sustainable practices in place. So just like leisure travel, your corporate guests are searching for a sustainable hotel or location to stay at. This could be mandated by company travel policies in place to allow those corporate travelers to keep track of their Scope 3 emissions. And for all of those sales teams completing their annual RFP requests from FedRooms, the 2022 RFP had questions to hotels asking about electric vehicle charging stations and reduction of single-use plastics. Other questions included if the property is doing any fair trade or organic or sustainably sourced ingredients. Questions regarding if your property, your parent company have set science-based carbon targets and what percent of your property's energy comes from any renewable sources. These will begin to play a factor on if your hotel or hotels qualify for that specific RFP. We also have states that are continuing specific programs like the Florida Green Lodging Program. This program requires that any state employee must stay at a Florida Green Lodging Program certified hotel. So at the time of this webinar, out of the 3,700 hotel rooms in Florida, only a third of them are actually available for state employees to stay at. And of course, in March of 2022, the SEC released a proposal for new rules requiring companies to disclose their risks related to climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. These changes will require companies to disclose their greenhouse gas emissions and their Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. The SEC is pushing to make this a standard for reporting to the public, but also becoming an integral part in financing for hotels. Being able to provide lenders with your ESG report to show the sustainable efforts being done by your property are going to become key. So something that you might have already started to plan or think about is how you're going to support your guests who show up to your properties with an electric vehicle. Maybe your valet teams are asking for chargers to be installed, or you're seeing the requests on your post-stay surveys. No matter what it is, more electric vehicles are coming. On this chart, from 2020 to 2025, it's expected that 26% more electric vehicles will be sold and on the road. And within the next 7 years, we should see that increase to over 90%. And it's not only the general public that will be purchasing electric vehicles. Hertz and other rental car companies have begun larger EV orders with manufacturers for their rental fleets. More and more of your travelers will be driving to your hotels in an electric vehicle. Those guests are going to begin to look at EV charging stations as a standard amenity that's offered to from your hotel. In fact, EV charging stations have become an amenity filter on Expedia to allow guests to select hotels that have EV charging stations. But the need doesn't necessarily start or end there. As EV sales continue, that will bring in a larger amount of used electric vehicles to the market that some of your staff might begin to purchase and drive to work. They'll be looking to charge their vehicles while they're at work, specifically at your hotels. So Brian's going to go into additional details in regards to electric vehicle charging stations later in our conversation. So let's get started on clean energy. So when we talk about energy generation and solar and wind generation, that's really our biggest focus with regards to clean energy. Solar and wind generation is nothing new to the hospitality industry. Many smaller hotels just have not installed solar arrays due to the small footprint of their real estate. However, as solar technology has become more advanced and more affordable, we've seen hotels begin to install solar canopies in the parking lots of their hotels. In addition to parking canopies, as many benefits for a specific hotel. Of course, there's the energy savings at first, with on-site power generation offsetting the monthly energy expenses. They are efficient use of space that will provide additional shade for your employees and customers. Now, these solar canopy installations are also a great location for your electric vehicle charging stations. With a combination of solar canopies and your rooftop solar array, you will begin to lower your carbon footprint and make your property much more sustainable. In addition to your power generation, look to power storage to increase your resiliency. With battery power storage, you can use electricity generated throughout the day for your use in the evening when energy is a little bit higher. And for any of you in areas that might be experiencing some rolling blackouts, this is a great option to keep your guests happy. Now, we also know that the utility companies are in the business for selling power. So as utility rates increase, having battery storage will allow you to avoid these increases and use your storage energy instead of relying on the grid. And as I mentioned, resiliency, many communities look to their area hotels during times of natural disaster. In the course of a natural disaster, many times it could take days or weeks to get power turned back on. You can support your community if your property is generating electricity with solar and, of course, your battery storage systems. So a great example of a property that's seen a tremendous return is the 133-room Courtyard by Marriott in Lancaster. They're actually set up to be 100% of its electricity generated from solar power. The property's installed a solar power system that generates more kilowatt hours of electricity every year than what the hotel even uses. This excess power becomes an asset that the property sells back to their local utility. Any extra solar electricity then goes back into the power grid to help supply nearby homes and businesses. Producing this much electricity requires a lot of solar panels and a lot of space. So this specific solar array was 2,700 panels. That's more than 2 football fields in size, which was obviously too big for the roof of the hotel. So the property actually placed their system on the roof of a warehouse that was next to the hotel. They also put in a specific power producing meter in the hotel lobby to get their hotel guests encouraging and knowledgeable of their solar generation. So the cost of this solar system was actually $1.5 million. And the Pennsylvania Department of Economy and Community Development's Commonwealth Financing Authority, it's a long one, actually supplied a grant of over $500,000 to help bring down the cost of this program. So with proven efficiency, solar technology has been getting more and more popular in the hospitality industry. It's becoming more and more cheaper. And there's numerous ways solar can benefit your business across different industries. So while the costs of solar have declined significantly over the last decade, it's still a significant investment for business owners looking to lower their electric bills. So in order to encourage the greater adoption of solar, the federal government, state and local governments, and utilities offer incentives to help make putting solar more affordable and accessible. These incentives typically take the form of solar rebates, tax benefits, and/or performance-based incentives, and can reduce the cost you pay for your solar anywhere from 30 to 50%. APTIM's in a position to be able to assist you with any sort of grants, assistance as needed. So feel free to reach out if you do have any questions in regards to that. So with solar, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Dan and talk about energy efficiencies.
All right, thank you, Christian. Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Reese. I'm APTIM's Director of Utility Energy Programs and have been working in energy efficiency for utilities across North America for about 15 years now. I'm seeing a lot of different projects come and go, and I'm really excited to see some of the things that Kristen was talking about happening in the market, because it sort of adds to the value proposition of energy efficiency projects, which is kind of what I like to focus on. So I wanted to just give some basic information about energy efficiency and then talk about how it ties in to some of the momentum in the market that Kristen discussed a moment ago, and then give an example of a project in an area where I would recommend looking kind of first in some of your properties. So energy efficiency overall, it's all about the strategies and tactics you take to use energy more effectively in your properties. You want to, the goal of energy efficiency when it's done well is to have, your occupants, your folks in the facilities not notice a difference in kind of the quality of lighting or temperature control or ventilation or health in a building, using less energy while you're doing that. Oftentimes, some of these things are even improved. You get better, more effective lighting that can help highlight certain areas of your hotel. You get better ventilation, and there's more better health in the building and those types of things. When done well, you can achieve benefits outside of energy savings and cost savings as well. Why is it becoming more important? When you reduce your operating costs, obviously that's a benefit. And when you're doing that and reducing your carbon footprint at the same time, it's one of the best ways to sort of start your path toward carbon reduction or achieving some of these certifications that are valuable in the marketplace, showing your customers that improvement. When you're lowering your operating costs, you can apply those dollars to larger projects where you have equipment replacement or moving in towards electrification or storage and those types of things that are part of your strategy. Improving comfort, control, and performance. It's a very likely outcome when you look at your facilities and have a professional come in and conduct an audit to find those opportunities to not just use less energy, but make folks more comfortable through better control of how a building uses energy. Another thing that is often overlooked, a non-energy benefit of energy efficiency, if you will, is improving equipment life. Often when we go into a facility like a hotel, we find equipment cycling on and off, for example, many times during a day where it wouldn't really need to if you installed equipment such as a variable frequency drive that would allow a piece of equipment to smoothly ramp up and down rather than cycling on and off. That can increase the life of the equipment and the value of the assets in your building. And then obviously what we're here to talk about today, it kind of helps you build the path to certifications that will be recognized in the marketplace and help attract more customers to your properties. So there's value all around. We tend to focus in energy efficiency on what are the kilowatt hours therms saved in each building we touch. And we accomplish that through a number of different methods. I mean, there's major equipment retrofits, there's minor retrofits where you're increasing control of those larger pieces of equipment, HVAC equipment, chillers, and things like that. There's really digging into the data and improving the quality of data that you have so you can manage your energy use more effectively across the board. Upgrading control systems to increase that data visibility and access so you can make better decisions or influence behavior in your building. Those behavioral changes can come through education of building operators who are on your staff, or even sort of signaling to occupants on different things they can do in the rooms to conserve energy. There's many strategies there. Along with energy efficiency and sort of reducing the amount you use all the time, there are strategies and technologies that can be applied to help you reduce your energy use more specifically during peak demand events in the area in which your properties exist. Oftentimes that load shifting can save you money if there is a time of use rate in effect in that region. So there's some very interesting work going on there as part of the utility programs that we work on, and I'm sure in the private sector. And then finally, commissioning and retro commissioning, which we're going to talk about an example of retro commissioning here in a minute. You know, when you have a new property being constructed or renovated significantly, commissioning that facility with an eye toward energy efficiency can help you during the design and construction phase understand where your options are for installing more efficient equipment and strategies and control systems up front. So for the life of that property, it's operating more efficiently and effectively and saving you money from the moment you open the doors. Retro commissioning is taking existing facilities and conducting a very detailed audit to kind of do the same, but for an existing property. And that's what I really want to talk about with this example on the next slide, Christian. So here's an example of a retro commissioning project in a hotel in Texas. You can see some of the statistics on the hotel on the right. You know, it's almost 1 million square foot hotel. There were a couple of major measures installed at relatively low capital cost. So we were able to go in and optimize how the chiller sequences throughout the day to make it a more effective use of that piece of capital equipment. And then some VFDs are variable frequency drives, which is kind of the example I alluded to earlier. You get better control more incrementally over equipment. And between these two measures, we were able to save almost 1 million kilowatt hours a year in that building, and contribute almost $100,000 in annual utility savings. Due to the cost of that, those basically operational measures with low capital cost, that project paid back almost instantly. And this client can, sort of reinvest those dollars into some other effort to make their property more green or more efficient. So major impact through this process. What is the process? Well, it starts with finding a qualified retro commissioning service provider. That can be done through commissioning. There's commissioning industry groups that will have certifications for different regions on what retro commissioning entails. I can talk more about that later if anyone's interested. But when you have a service provider who has the expertise to come in and kind of look through your facility operations and equipment at a detailed level, and really understand where and how you're using energy, and then sort of bring to light all the different opportunities through a deep analysis of what those opportunities might deliver to you in savings. You can prioritize which of those, we call them energy efficiency measures, you might implement, and kind of create a plan to either tackle them all at once or do them year over year. So as you realize dollar savings and operational cost savings over time, with a set of recommendations that retro commissioning service provider will do that for you and help you build a plan, help you with contractors, finding contractors who are qualified to implement those different energy savings measures and overseeing the implementation of those, and then verifying on the back end that those different, whether they be control sequences or installation of new equipment, whatever the strategies may be, verifying that they're in place, and then sort of documenting that those improvements so that they can be maintained over time by your staff. It's sort of a complete end-to-end package where you can identify all the opportunities in your facility and just kind of pick them off one by one. This example, these two measures that they implemented and realized this, incredible energy savings was just step one. And, over the years, they will achieve more energy savings through this assessment that occurred to start things off. So I think it's a great example of where to get started, how to build momentum, how to integrate it into your greater strategy for your facilities. This project, when you look at it, it's a hotel in Texas, and they're saving $84,000 a year. with a very minimal, like a $8,400 investment. It's a pretty low cost environment. And I can't help but think, if this property were in California or a place in the country where there's, higher energy costs, those annual energy savings can just go up and up. And it's an example of how retro commissioning can be very effective almost in any market. And even if you start off small with a couple of measures, you can have a great impact. I think that's all I have, Christian. Hand it back to you, unless there are questions.
And no questions yet. I'm sure some will come through, and then we'll head on over into the wonderful world of electric vehicle charging with Brian.
Awesome. Thank you, Christian. Yeah, so as mentioned earlier, my name is Brian Bilbo. I'm the business development director for our clean tech division at APTIM. And thus I do a ton of work with EV charging infrastructure. So I came to APTIM from the largest independent reseller of EV charging systems. So I've worked on all types of different projects across the country and pretty much every sector you can think of. So I'm going to just take you through a high level look at EV charging, go through some of the terminology. And so this might be painfully boring if you already know quite a bit about EV charging, but hopefully for those who don't, this will be a little bit of information for you. And then we'll get into some of the more nitty gritty looking specifically at EV charging in the hospitality space. So just quickly wanted to look at the different types of EVs, the levels of charging, and then really just what are organizations purchasing for their properties today, and both my experience and my customers' experience. So looking at the types of EVs in my experience and in my mind, what I think of when I think of an EV, I think of the battery electric vehicle. So that's what most people are thinking of. You're thinking of the Tesla, Rivian, the new GM, anything that you have to plug in order to drive that vehicle. The next big one that you'll see on the road, pretty much every manufacturer that I know of has a PHEV, so plug-in hybrid electric vehicle at this point. So has an internal combustion engine as well as a small short range battery. So perfect vehicle for people that have a short commute every day, maybe 20, 30 miles, because they can 100% use that battery that they're able to plug in and charge. They may never even end up using that internal combustion engine on a day-to-day drive. And then the last one in my head is the Prius. It's the hybrid electric vehicle. So this one has no plug. It has the internal combustion engine as well as a battery, but is to supplement that internal combustion engine. So looking at the different levels of charging for the battery EV and the PHEVs that we actually need to plug in order to charge them, usually it's broken out into level 1, 2, 3, and DC fast. 3 and DC fast are kind of interchangeable. But level 1 charging is your slow trickle charge. So that's your 110 volt. That's the plug that you've got your computer plugged into right now. You're talking 2 to 5 miles of range per hour. And even with a small battery, you're talking 17 to 25 hours to probably get it up to about 80%. So this is a perfect scenario for long-term parking at the airport, emergency situations. You'll see the one up in the top right here is the level 1 charger that comes with 99.9% of cars on the road today. The next one is level 2. So level 2 is 208, 240 volt. That's going to be what your home dryer is plugged into and really offers this giant range of charging capabilities. So as low as 6 miles per hour, all the way up to 70 miles of range per hour charging on these. So it just depends on the charger that you go with, how much power you're providing that charger with, but much quicker, talking about maybe 4 to 5 hours to get up to 80% versus this 17 to 25 on the low end. That is probably the charger that you've seen. And if you haven't seen a Tesla supercharger down at the end, you've probably seen a charge point station there. That's a level 2 station. Level 3 or DC fast is 480 volt commercial level power. So this is 3-phase power and is really meant for junctions at highways, convenience stores. We'll talk about another option for DC that you may want to consider, but this is typically going to be something that you're looking to put in if you're trying to juice up quick and get back on the road. So the very quickest cars with the very quickest batteries, quickest chargers are going to be 15 minutes to get your car charged back up. But talking more like an hour to an hour and a half when you're talking about that Tesla supercharger down at the bottom right to get your car charged back up. And just as a quick note, all these speeds are highly dependent upon your vehicle. I'm more than happy to dive into that if anybody has any questions specifically around that, but ultimately it has to do with both the charger and what your car can accept. So just to look at what are other organizations buying, what have my customers been purchasing for their properties in the hospitality industry. So primarily what I've seen is the level 2 charger. So reason for that being is, one, it's far more reasonably priced than what you would have with a DC charger typically. And it really has this huge range of charging capabilities. So if maybe you don't have a ton of power availability on site, you can still install a station that we can electronically limit down to 3 kilowatts, which will still offer 6 miles of range per hour, or we can go as high as that 70 miles of range if you've got the power availability on site. The other station that I wanted to mention, because this is a fantastic option in very few cases, but still a fantastic option, is what is referred to as destination DC. So this is typically only 20 to 25 kilowatts. And you can see with the level 3 stations, usually that kind of starts at 25 kilowatts. This is a perfect option if you have a destination at one of your properties that you're expecting guests to come onto site for a short period of time and want to offer that higher level of amenity. So maybe you have a restaurant that is used by a lot of the rest of the community, but maybe isn't 100% just guests that are staying overnight at your property. So in this case, it's a great option if you have DC power readily available and a great reason to offer it. But Christian, I can jump to the next one. Thank you. So just wanted to quickly go over some of the charging solutions that are out there. So when we look at level 1 through 3 chargers, there's a bunch of options within that as well. And so with level 1 charging, like I said, this is going to be the one that comes with your new EV. It is always going to be a dumb charging station. And so we call it a dumb charging station because that's all it is. It is a plug that you plug into the wall, you plug it into your car, it's going to charge it up. That is all it's going to do. The next step up is typically an RFID only station. So this is going to be a station that I think everybody's probably very familiar here with the RFID hotel key card. Same concept. So you're going to use a card to turn the station on, turn it off. That's your option with it. Now, I will say there has been a development lately in the industry with some of the manufacturers out here are providing software for the RFID only stations. So kind of offers a mid-tier price station. So you do have that access control with the card and an additional capability to add some software to it and monitor what your guests are actually using as far as electricity goes. Now with that, you should be able to run a report and add that to a bill once your guest is checking out. Now, none of that is going to be automated. So most organizations, in my experience, end up going with this most expensive option, which is the true smart charging station. So this is connected through 4G LTE, sometimes Wi-Fi. You're able to monitor usage in real time. You can charge fees on the charging system at that POS system that is actually on the charging station. You can control access remotely through integrated software. But with all of this stuff, you do end up getting more fees for that software network credit card. So next, I just wanted to look at some of the potential revenue models. And so I don't want to say this is the only thing that's available to you. There are a ton of different models that are out there, but in my experience, this is the big 3 that most people are going with today. And in really most situations, most organizations want to go with the owner operator model. So you purchase the station, you install them, you manage them. With that, you also control all the fees set on the station and you get the revenue, whatever those fees that you are set, minus the credit card fees or those software fees that are on top of it. With this, you also decide your O&M plan. So if it is an O&M plan that you decide to go with the manufacturer, a third party, your own facilities team, whatever it may be, you can figure it out. We can help you figure out the strategy that you want to go about taking care of those stations. The next option, and probably the next most popular option, is a lessee model. So you end up paying a higher annual fee to have a manufacturer come install and manage the station. You get to set the pricing, you receive the revenue for the charging, but with paying that higher annual fee to have that station leased, you additionally are paying a higher fee for O&M to be controlled by that manufacturer. And so you are leasing that station from this manufacturer. They want to make sure it gets taken care of. You're kind of stuck in that deal. And then the last option, which is in my experience and from what I can tell across the US, the least favorable option amongst the hospitality world, which is the lessor model, and probably the least favored option just across the board. So this is a situation where you would work with a charge point operator to lease your property and have stations installed on your property just purely as an amenity. And in most situations, they set the pricing and they give you a percentage of the revenue. Now, this may seem like a good option for a lot of organizations, but in my experience, in my customers' experience, there's really three main setbacks here. Typically, what ends up happening, and I don't want to say this is always what happens, but I've seen many cases where either they set the pricing too high, so you don't see a ton of traffic on the charging stations. They set the price too low, so you can't offset your electricity costs. Or three, the worst case scenario, you just really never see a percentage of the revenue. And that is the worst case scenario, and typically has led my customers right back up the chain to go with lessee or an owner operator model. Thanks, Christian. So the last thing I wanted to go through is our EV charging installation roadmap. And so this is actually our consultation roadmap that we developed at APTIM. This is essentially what you're looking at would be what we would typically look at for a consultation for your business. So if you were to come to me and say to me, Brian, I have no idea what we want to do outside of we want to do EV charging. So let's go from there, and I'll give you the quick breakdown of what that would look like. So typically we would start in the top right here at the business operational assessment. And so what that is really looking at a top-down overview of your organization, why you want to do electrification transportation. Why are we looking at EV charging? What is the goal? And ultimately, what is the strategy to go about implementing this? So is it a pilot at one location? And is it a pilot at 10 locations? Are we just going to hit the ground running and just put charging stations in everywhere? What is the best option for your particular business and your particular goals? So from there, we can really flow into the rest of the roadmap. So from that business operational assessment, what we can do is come out, start doing on-site infrastructure assessments, figure out what makes sense at each one of your locations. It may not be the same answer for every single one of them. And from there, we can go into the product recommendations, looking at really what makes sense. What are you trying to do with them? Is it 100% an amenity? Is this something that you're hoping to gain some revenue on? What is the best option for each part of your property? Next, we can get into the real nitty gritty, looking at site design and construction planning, and then looking at funding procurement. So what rebates are out there? What grants are out there? Are they local, state, federal, utility? Can we get that for you because of the location that you're in, because of the size of your business? And then we can look at the utility upgrades, permitting. If you need to have the utility brought out, that is another piece that we can assist you with. And then the last three is really putting the charging station into the ground. So actually site construction, installing and commissioning the station so that it's set up, ready to go. Once you actually install that station, you're not sitting there with a station that doesn't work for years after you've actually put it in the ground. And then lastly, that O&M piece of it that we discussed earlier, which will ultimately be a big decider after we've decided, do you want to own it? Do you want to lease it? Do you want to lease out your property? And that's about all I have, but happy to answer any questions here at the end, but I'll hand it over to Christian and let him finish things up.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, it's the roadmap that we put out there is really for us to do all that hard work and allow you to focus on your guests. So, because we understand that. So, key takeaways from today's webinar, we're seeing still the demand is really coming from the guests in all different aspects. We've got funding that's available across multiple channels. You want to future-proof your hotel because the demand is coming, if you like it or not, with more EVs hitting the road. And as always, as Dan said, get started on an assessment, get that data that you need in order to even build and get started with regards to your ESG report. So with that, we'll open this up to our Q&A session. Again, I'm going to kick things off, and Dan, over to you. Again, you mentioned the importance of data coming from your energy, and what sort of reporting are you talking about when you say what data you need in order to kind of get things moving?
Well, to get things moving on an energy efficiency project, there's a lot of ways to go about it. Whether you have a really sophisticated control system that gives you 15-minute interval data across your entire facility, or whether you just have your energy bills for the past year kind of showing what you've consumed and what you've paid. We can start from either of those positions. However, if you're more on the former, you have a control system and you're able to kind of monitor your regular energy use day to day, hour to hour, even down to the 15-minute intervals, which can be common. You're able to pinpoint where your opportunities may live just from that data. There's even services and approaches that are in some of our programs where we can look at that data remotely and say, I think you have an issue with your HVAC equipment, and it has to do with your ramp up time and your ramp down. And if you change it this way, you could save X kilowatt hours, a year. And so the better the resolution on that data, the more reliable it is. The more can be done faster. I mean, it just a common thing with having a good data set is it gives you the ability to do things at lower cost and faster. We can still get there with the billing data, but when you have that holistic view, you're in a much better position. And I would say it can also inform your greater strategy when you're thinking about extending toward charging stations or adding solar or other distributed generation. When you understand where you're at and where you're going, you can model those at the right size and bring them in a way that makes sense for you.
That's great. Good stuff. Brian, a question for you. Do you have a specific model of EV charging stations that your clients see the most success with overall? And within those specific brands, would you recommend a specific kind for maybe a luxury hotel versus maybe more of a budget-friendly hotel?
So just clarifying, so what model specifically are we talking about, or model like
the actual charging
purchasing, or
yeah,
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Christian?
like the actual charging station model itself might be the most successful.
Gotcha. So best overall model. I got you. Yeah. So in my experience and what I have seen, it is typically that owner operator. And reason for that being is that you're not really tied in to anything other than the purchasing of the station. So it is a higher upfront cost, obviously, but you're not paying this ongoing fee that is far more than what you would pay upfront over maybe 4 or 5 years. Now you spent twice as much on that lease for that station. And additionally, you're paying more for the O&M as well. So ultimately, for maybe the bigger hotels versus the newer budget-oriented hotels, either way, it's the owner operator is probably the best way to go in my experience. Reason for that being is that there are a ton of different options on the market today. So you don't have to go with the nicest, fanciest charging station with all the bells and whistles. If you're talking about an implementation that's at a smaller level, or maybe you don't need all of this software components and all of these different things to be able to automatically generate reports and pull all of these things off. Really, with that case, you can jump right in the middle, grab an RFID only station, an owner operator model, decide you want to do all level 2s. You want to have the software that just lets you run a report to be able to add that bill to your guests' bills before they leave for when they check out. And ultimately there, you're doing almost zero maintenance unless someone breaks the station. Level 2 stations, particularly, you're not looking at big O&M costs unless you're paying in for that huge warranty at the beginning for maybe the lease situation. There are still those big warranties if somebody does break it, but in most cases, even with those warranties, if it's vandalism or somebody just comes up and rips a cord off, that manufacturer is not going to pay for it anyways. So really, either way, whether you're higher end, established, or newer, budget oriented, I would say there's more than enough options from a purchasing standpoint from a consultant standpoint and an installer standpoint that it still makes more sense to go for that owner operator model.
Yeah, and that works really well in hospitality, right? Because we've had a couple hospitality clients who are putting this in as an amenity in their public parking space, but then they're also incorporating some of these, RFID stations in their valet section for the valet teams to put in those machines, charge their vehicles, but then also be able to report on energy use and everything along those lines, but have that capability of potentially offering free charging for any sort of, VIP that's coming in with a special card that's given at the front desk, with their welcome packet or anything along those lines. So, the capabilities can be a mixture of all of them based upon your property's needs.
Absolutely.
Excellent. What other questions are out there? I know that we have worked with one client of ours who is, kind of adamant of having the same sort of branded charging station throughout their hotels, just to kind of keep that uniformity going. That's something that is available. We're brand agnostic when we come to our consulting services. So again, it's what works best for your business. So, well, I think Rebecca, pretty quiet on the question front this time around. That means we must have done an incredible job in our presentation and provided all the good information. But at the end of the day, these 3 webinars all kind of tied together, getting started in regards to your sustainability efforts within hospitality, all kind of just go back to that point of just get started in some sort of aspect, right? Get started on a sustainability assessment of your property to learn your energy usage, your water usage, the amount of waste coming out of your property, and what improvements can be made moving forward. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it's a journey. It's a real journey. You can't do everything at once, but every improvement helps. And from our side, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today and for the whole series. I saw that we had some people come to all 3 webinars, which is wonderful to see. I hope the presentation answered any questions you might have on this topic, but if you have any other questions, like Christian says, just funnel through Green Key and we can get the questions over to Christian. Also, we will be putting the webinar up on our website for everyone to view, and we will send that link out as well. Well, have a great rest of your day, and thank you so much, everyone.
bye. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.